I really wrote the book for me, which is why it was so different than every other book that existed. And I wrote the book that I wanted to read. So it wasn't filled with all sorts of fluff. It was less than 100 pages. It was straight to the point. It was very simple vernacular, not complicated. And that's personally what I wanted in the book. And people seem to resonate with that. So that's why I would say, like, if you're creating, just create for you first. You're the first audience, really, and the most important one. So if it resonates with you, it's going to resonate with someone else.
Welcome to the Lean Marketing Podcast, where we unpack proven strategies to get more leads, make more profit, and do less marketing. I'm your host, Allan. Today, we have a very special guest, Joseph Nguyen. He's the author of Don't Believe Everything You Think. Now, this is a phenomenal book, and it's phenomenal from multiple angles. First of all, the content is freaking awesome, right? So it's a book about anxiety and how to manage anxiety and a lot more than that, which we'll unpack in just a moment. But also the way that Joseph has marketed this book has so many lessons, not just for authors, but for anyone marketing anything. I got to hang out with Joseph for a couple of days in Nashville recently, and I've asked him to be here on the podcast and share a lot of his ideas, his strategies, his tools with us. Welcome to the show, Joseph. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Allan. It's such a pleasure. And yeah, just when we met before, about a month ago, you just had such amazing energy. And I loved every second of every single interaction. So to be able to have this conversation with you is truly a blessing.
Oh, thanks, man. That's really kind of you. So I've been kind of stalking you ever since we met. I've been looking at your book, reading your book, your TikToks, your YouTube channel, your reviews. And I mean, look, your trajectory has been incredibly impressive. I think any author would be, stoked with the kind of results that you've gotten. You've got over 10,000 reviews on Amazon. I had looked just this morning, your book was number 220 across all the books on Amazon, which is absolutely phenomenal. And the even more impressive part is you're completely self-published. You don't have a big publisher behind you, don't have a big PR firm behind you, don't have any of that stuff. I'd love to unpack some of that, but maybe for those listening who have not read your book or don't know what you're about or what your book is about, what's the one paragraph summary of what you do and the work that you do and the contents of your book?
Yeah. So to put it as simply as I can, in the book, I explored the root cause of psychological and emotional suffering and how to let go of it to find lasting peace. For me, I tried many different modalities. I mean, you can name it. It's just because I was struggling so much in life with chronic anxiety, having a business, and just trying to find and discover who I am, unpack all the trauma that I had in the past. And so there's so many different modalities out there, just hundreds, if not thousands of different ways. But it seemed so difficult whenever I would try any single modality, and nothing broke it down as simply as possible. Because if you've tried healing yourself or just discovering who you are, you've probably noticed that almost most modalities work to some degree. So how is it that there are some religions that work for some? There are some, maybe doing yoga will work for another person. Maybe hypnotherapy will work for another. Maybe doing cold exposure therapy would work for somebody. And it's very interesting to see the broad spectrum of different ways that people can calm their mind and relieve themselves of psychological suffering or some sort of anxiety. So to me, I did my best, and I just was so curious about why did all of them work? And so I found the common denominator between all of those things and essentially found out that if a modality, like the reason why most modalities work is because they help you stop thinking. They calm your mind and essentially bring you into the present moment. And when you're in the present moment and you're no longer judging everything that's going on in your mind and you're simply holding space for it, that's where peace is. It's the space between your thoughts, not trying to manage your thoughts. And so the big epiphany in the book is that as soon as you stop judging everything in your life, you can find a little bit more peace. And slowly that space between those thoughts can expand. And that's when you're a lot happier in life.
I love that. What was the role of trauma in kind of stopping you from being successful in business, from doing some of the things that you wanted to do? Because a lot of people feel like, hey, there's kind of this dividing line between your personal life, and that's your personal life, and then there's your business and your all of that sort of stuff and your work. So how did that play a role for you?
Yeah, great question. So the separation between work and personal life does not exist. As much as we can try, who is the one showing up to work? It's you. It's like who's running the business? It's you. Unless you've exited, right? Then you don't have this problem, and you probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you're that successful. But if you're like most people, most entrepreneurs, it's quite a struggle until you get there. So in my personal life, whenever there's some sort of turbulence going on, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's me in my own past, all of that gets brought into the business, and that deeply affects it. And if that trauma is not dealt with, or if that anxiety isn't dealt with, then everything I do comes from a state of fight or flight. And when we're doing work and we're extremely stressed, what is the quality of that work? How present are we with clients? Not very. But when we are healed, when we come from a place of love instead of fear, what kind of things can we create? Right? When we're in flow, how do we feel? It's expansive. It's amazing. We're way more creative when we're not in a stressful fight or flight state. So for me, what happened with all the past traumas is that it eventually caught up to me. I tried to run away from it, but they say your demons are faster than you. And so they definitely caught up. And that's essentially when I hit rock bottom, when everything started failing, when I started losing 80, 90% of my clients, when I went 50 grand into debt, when I lost my business partner and we had a really bad split. Like my wife her health conditions were just not great. And so she was hospitalized multiple times. So at that point, I was really at my lowest low. And I think it takes a moment like that, like rock bottom, for you to really change. And that was the case for me because we're quite stubborn creatures, human beings, and we don't change unless it's absolutely necessary. And until the pain of where we are is greater than the fear of change, we won't change. And so usually it takes rock bottom when everything is gone, when you reduce to zero, when your ego has nothing left to grasp onto. That's when we decide that we need to change. And I'm very grateful for all those things that happened because it led me to this point to even look for alternate solutions and a different way of living and viewing life to be able to be happier.
I love it. I love it. I totally agree with you. I often say to my clients, there's no such thing as business problems. There are only personal problems that manifest themselves in your business.
Correct.
And I think business is one of the best personal development tools that there is because all of your habits, all of your thinking, all of your self-limiting beliefs, they will manifest themselves in your business. If you don't believe that someone will pay that much for your product, well, you'll be right. If your work habits are poor, that'll be reflected in your results as well. So I've seen that so many times. And I heard this recently and I really took this to heart. Essentially, you're draining from the same battery. It's kind of like, if you think about your iPhone, whether you're playing a game or whether you're using a business app, it's all draining the same battery. So the divider between personal and business and work and all of that really isn't there. And I 100% agree with that. So with your idea to write this book, you're not like a PhD in psychology. You're not a world leading expert at all of this sort of stuff. There are some incredibly well-known books in the space like The Power of Now and all of that sort of stuff. What made you think that writing this book would be a good idea? And what got you to that place where you thought, you know what, I'm just going to do this?
Yeah, it was a terrible idea when I had it. It just not great. The odds were completely against me. No degree, no background in psychology, nothing. I was 21, 22 years old. I knew absolutely nothing. So why would I, right? And honestly, I think it was because I was a nobody that I even attempted because I didn't feel like I had something to lose. I already lost everything. And that's why I think the rock bottom is so important because it really removes everything that isn't important in life anymore. And the things that I cared about, like money, fame, significance, all that, it just went out the window. So it didn't really come across my mind in terms of like, oh, people are going to perceive me in any way. People didn't even see me. I wasn't even known. Nobody knows who I am. So because of that, it gave me at least a stepping stone. And from there, I could build on it. But honestly, I didn't really write the book because I thought I was going to be successful. I really don't think that anyone should write a book if that's the case. For me, I was written because I wanted to write it for myself. I believe that the best books come from the author's greatest pains. And if something is that important to you, something that truly did change your life or transformed it in some way, then you have something worth sharing. And that's all that mattered to me was that I wanted this on paper If no one saw it, that's fine. At least I have it. And that I remember what got me out of the darkest places I've had to traverse. And if it helped one soul, then that's all that matters. People can think of me as whatever, they can say whatever, they can leave all sorts of reviews, which they have too. It's not all positive by any means, but there's significantly more positive than negative remarks. And I'm really grateful for that. But at the end of the day, that's not why I did it. And I think that really came through. And so I really wrote the book for me, which is why it was so different than every other book that existed. And I wrote the book that I wanted to read. So it wasn't filled with all sorts of fluff. It was less than 100 pages. It was straight to the point. It was very simple vernacular, not complicated. And that's personally what I wanted in the book. And people seem to resonate with that. So that's why I would say, like, if you're creating, just create for you first. You're the first audience, really, and the most important one. So if it resonates with you, it's going to resonate with someone else.
I think that's so true. Like a lot of times I get asked the same thing, how do I write? Why is the one-page marketing plan been so successful and so on and so forth? And a lot of times my answer is it's just the book I wish I had when I was learning marketing the first time, when I was definitely not in a good place. I was trying to figure out marketing. I was trying to figure out how do I get clients in the door. And I was just a dead broke IT geek, kind of struggling, good at what I could do, but not really good at attracting clients. So I think that's such an important point from a content creation point of view, because a lot of people turn on the camera or whatever and they're like, all right, what should I create today? Or what should I write today? Or whatever. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but writing the content or creating the content that you want to watch, that so you're essentially creating for yourself. So even if nobody watches it, you've created something that you want. That's something that I've had to kind of reinforce to myself. That's been the basis of a lot of my own success. And, once you get successful, sometimes you forget about that a little bit and you
Oh,
start,
of course.
kind of just creating that artificial content or just creating something to pump out. And so I've got to keep reminding myself, hey, is this something I would want to read? Is this something I would want to watch or listen to or whatever? And so I try to bring that now to each time I create a piece of content. Like, this is the conversation I would have with you if we're just having a coffee. Like, I'm not here going over notes and asking standard questions. I just want to have a conversation with you, the same as we would in over a coffee or a lunch, or the same as we did over Nashville. We talked about a lot of these same things.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when it's most natural, right? And
Yeah,
that's when it feels most aligned. You can immediately feel if someone is creating out of unauthenticity, right? Just
yeah,
just not being themselves, and we can smell that from a mile away. And in the world of especially AI now, there's so many things, there's so much noise. And so it's important to be the signal amongst that. And there's no better signal than just being yourself, being authentic
yeah.
and sharing your own truth, whatever that is. I believe that we suffer most when we do not speak our own truth. So the
Mm.
book was a version of mine, and I hope that this story inspires other people to step into theirs.
Yeah, I love that. So, getting a little bit more technical, what do you think made this book be such a hit, right? And it's still a massive hit at the moment. Yeah, every day, tons of people are buying it. It's ranking extremely well, tons of positive reviews. What do you think it is that's making people go, yeah, I want that. I'm gonna add that to my Kindle or buy the paperback or whatever. What do you think some of those factors might be?
So before someone buys the book, the first thing is that people judge a book by its cover.
I
And
agree.
before that, they judge a book by its title.
Yes.
So that to me was one of the most important parts when creating the book. I mean, I wrote the book first and then made the title and cover, but you can do it in the opposite way too. But for me, if the title didn't capture my own attention and make me stop and kind of reflect or just inquire and cause self-inquiry in some way, then I failed as a marketer, as a consumer too, because I need to develop my own taste to be able to know what's good or not. So for me, it was first designing the title, and don't believe everything you think is the title. And that was something when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's a brilliant title. It stopped me in my tracks. So I just used it. And there's a few other books that have the same title too. So it's not, and book titles aren't copyrighted. So to me, it wasn't that big like the other books. So I was like, this is really interesting. And I think I can do something with this. And then the subtitle was just as important, which is why your thinking is the beginning and end of suffering. So right there from the title and subtitle, people just immediately want to buy it. And I coupled that with a very simple, minimal line art in terms of having like a silhouette of a person or just the head of a person. And then there's a lot of scrambled thoughts within the head on the cover. For me, that was my particular taste. It didn't look like any other nonfiction book on the market. It was very
Mhm.
different, but I really liked it. And that stuck out to me. And I just designed on Canva, and I'm not a designer, but I just thought this seems pretty good. And I just went through a bunch of templates until I liked something. But that was just because I designed it for myself, and I wasn't
Yeah.
saying, what would a publisher think about this cover, or what would a high level designer think about it? It didn't matter to me. It was just, did I like it? Would I buy this if it was on the shelf? How
Yeah.
does it compare to other books that would be on the shelf? And to me, it checked all the boxes, and I got really lucky, honestly, just looking through Canva and finding something that worked. And I happened to stumble upon the title just unknowingly too, just out of the blue one day as I was waiting for a title to come up. But I think setting the intention is so important for ideation, and it's less about force and more about flow.
Yeah.
So whenever I create anything, I set the intention first. And then that's why when we're kind of not focused on the task, let's say we're struggling with a very difficult problem, most of the times the solution comes when we're not actually working on the problem. It comes when we're showering, when we're going on a walk, when we're doing dishes, when we're doing something mundane. And that's because we're not forcing anymore, and we're open, and we're highly suggestive in that state. So I just set the intention and I essentially heightened my sensitivity for ideas.
Mm.
And so when I was consuming content or books or walking around looking at other businesses and just living life, because I already set that intention in the back of my head, your subconscious starts working for you, and it starts looking for or solving the problem for you as you're living your life. And it's a fantastic way to do it, and one that feels way more natural than trying to force everything.
It's a phenomenal title, but I really want to underscore something that you said. There's been so many times in my life when I'm just trying to force a problem, like I'm just trying to get the solution. I'm working for days, I'm grinding on something, and then I'm like, I let it go. I'm like, all right, let's set this aside. I'll deal with this in a day or two or whatever. And then I either wake up with the answer or I wake up in the answer in the middle of the night. And I'm like, yeah, it's just incredible. It's like your subconscious starts working in the background. It's kind of like a background task on a computer or a phone or whatever. It's just something's going on in the background when you let go and it happens. And I'm not a super woo woo sort of person, but there is something weird that happens when you kind of just let go and it will come to you.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit, like setting an intention. Like, what does that mean?
So the reason why that worked for you was because as soon as we try to force a solution, we are essentially thinking. And to me, I define the word thinking as struggle, as it's highly strenuous, and it's not natural necessarily. Like it's not really natural to just stress out all the time. And when we're in that state, let's say we're stressing out about it, again, we return to a fight or flight mode. We are not creative in a fight or flight mode. We are in a survival mode. We're trying to look at everything in our environment, scan for anything that could be life threatening, and dial in on it and just get out of the area or fight it. So our bodies are actually not designed in that state. And what happens is when we're in a fight or flight mode, all of the blood actually like gets moved out of our digestive system, right? That's why our digestive system slows and we start getting tummy aches or something like that when we're stressed out all the time. IBS, that's what I had back then when I was in chronic anxiety, and all the blood just goes to our limbs so that we can actually get out of the area. So when that happens, the blood's not circulating as much and we're not as creative because we're not having as much oxygen, right? Our breath is shallower, it's not as deep. And so when you're meditating, what happens is you're trying to lengthen your breath and you're slowing your breathing down. And that way you slow your brain waves down so that you're much more suggestible. You go from like a high beta state, which is kind of like an awake state, but it can be very stressful. And you go down to like kind of slower ones like alpha and then all the way down to theta is where you really want to be. And that's where you're like most at peace when you're meditating. But that's in hypnotherapy, that's where you want to be. And that's what you try to get to because that's where you're most suggestive. That's when essentially you tap into your subconscious. And that essentially is when, because you're so open, you're much more receptive to new ideas. When we're trying to force a solution, we're stuck. We put our blinders on and we get stuck in the same cycle of thinking. But Einstein had the similar thing where when he was really stuck on a problem, he would actually stop working on it like you did, but he would just go play the violin or do something else. And when he was playing the violin, then all of a sudden, sometime later, it'll hit him in terms of solution. And Dostoevsky, like he also did something very similar. The philosopher, he would go on walks. And it's said that he wrote like a lot of his books while going on that stroll. And it's because the mind is in a much calmer state and it's much more receptive to new ideas. And yeah, whenever we're holding on to old thinking, there's no room for new ideas. And if you think about something that's highly opinionated, how open are they to different opinions, to different ideas? Not very much. And so that's kind of the key.
I can absolutely 100% relate about going for a walk and then just getting hit with a new idea. It's like almost I didn't come up with the idea, I was given the idea. Like it was just fully formed in my mind. And I'm like, yes, this is it. And I've just got to stop and take a note. But the thing that even freaked me out even more about this kind of thing is it's not just, okay, I need some idea on what to write or whatever, but sometimes a very highly technical solution to a problem, like a piece of code or something like that, will, I've had the situation where I've just been grinding away on some code and I'm not a programmer anymore. I used to do a little bit of programming back in the past, but I'd be grinding on something for 3 days and I'm like, I give up, I've just got to set this aside. I'm going crazy. And then I will wake up at 3 a.m. with the actual code that I've got to write. And I'm like, this is weird because it's not just I had an idea or something like that. I have a fully formed piece of code that I can just spit out and works. And so where did that come from? Was that in my mind the whole time? Did that come from somewhere else? Like, I don't know. And that's been a really weird phenomenon I've noticed. And, I have tried to tap into that a little bit more intentionally lately because I've had this happen so many times where just a fully formed, really good idea came to me. And like I say, it's not just the kernel of an idea that I developed. Sometimes that does happen, but sometimes a fully formed, great idea that I'm taking it, I'm just transcribing it. I'm not coming up with it,
Correct.
so.
Yeah. When people ask me like, how did you write the book? I just say like, I didn't, it didn't come from me. It came through me. And that's something very important to kind of note. Like I'm just transcribing, like you said, from the muse, whatever that is. Like whether you believe in God, the universe, whatever it is, there's something greater than just the thinking mind that we have going on, greater than the ego, right? And that to me is something that's very important because until we transcend that ego, that lower form of ourselves, we're never really going to be happy. We're just going to be stuck in that vicious cycle of psychological suffering of just wanting more and just wanting things that don't really matter, like status or whatever else that people generally care about that cause a lot of angst. But like I love thinking about inspiration kind of like a river. And the river of inspiration is always flowing, right? Let's say we're sitting on the bank. And what we do sometimes to try to get this inspiration, like let's say the inspiration is like some fish within the river. We jump in and like try to hand fish this thing. And we're struggling again and we're swimming against the current. And we're trying to grab the fish in there. When if we just kind of step out of it and give it space and we let go of trying to get the fish, and we just sit back and just let it flow, right? And we just maybe put the net in the water and we just wait, right? Let's say that the ideas and thoughts are those fish. Eventually something will catch in that net if you leave it there long enough. But the important part is we have to first set that intention, right? If we're not even near the river, we're not going to catch that fish or that idea. But we have to go to that river and be very diligent about that, of showing up, which is the most important part, then casting the net and waiting. As you're waiting for the fish, you can, build your campfire, you can set up a tent, you can do all these other things. And it's like, and you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like there's the fully formed fish, the fully formed idea, right? And so that's what I feel like that like inspiration can be. And it's not about being lazy, right? Like you're still going out and you still got to build a campfire, you still got to build the campsite, you got to like construct a tent and all this stuff. And you're still building the whole entire homestead, your life, your business, whatever it is. Just work on other things at the moment that call to you. And when you look back, you're like, oh my gosh, like I have the solution now. And like whenever I start stressing out, I take that as a reminder and an indicator to, hey, you should probably take a step back, create some space for yourself so new thoughts can come in. And then that's when it happens. So it's very interesting.
It really is. And the ability to be able to do that in a more intentional way, how would you do that? Almost every time it's happened to me in a big way, it's been unintentional. It's been like,
Yeah.
all right, like I give up on this, or I'm going to set this aside, or look, I'm just so tired, I'm just going to go for a walk or whatever. And then, it strikes. But how would I do that more intentionally?
Yeah. So what I was just alluding to is probably one of the best ways. A few things. Number one is you can intentionally create that space every day for yourself. So carving out however much time, like 10, 15, 30 minutes of your morning, right? Creating that space. And it's like, what is most important to you? Because most people don't know. What is the most important thing that you should be working on right now? What should you be dedicating your time to? Is this going to be worth it for you the next year, 3, 5 years? Or are you stressing about something that won't matter in that timeline? So most people just don't have those priorities. And which is why we're just constantly going from project to project, not knowing and not having a cohesive strategy. So number one is that reorienting yourself in the morning to know what is truly most important to you. What do you value most in life? And are you moving in that direction or not? If it is peace, then why are we constantly chasing these accolades that may or may not matter? If it's to really build a business to support your family, what's more important to you? Like, working so much to make way more money than you need and you're like leaving your family behind and working 80 hours a week, you're not even able to see them, when you could just cut back to 40, 30 hours, make a little bit less money, but you're able to have that time with them. So it's really knowing what's important to you. And once you have that, then you can do it throughout the day. So the next thing is, as you're living life and you're working in your business, if something does stress you out, then take a moment and take a step back and see, can you go on a walk? Can you meditate? Can you do something else? And you can maybe even work on different parts of the business, but generally it's best to just take a small break. It doesn't have to be long, like 5, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you need at that moment. Because when you come back with fresh eyes, you might even have the solution at that point. So it's really about tuning into your body and knowing what you need. Most people just kind of, deny their body. If you're like way too tired or something, you're like, oh, it's weak to take a break or to take a nap or whatever it is, or I don't need a snack. Like, I'll just power on. But that's exactly what perpetuates that state of stress that we're in. But if we just took a moment to really give ourselves what we need in the moment, then we come back with a cup that's full and we have something to pour out of it versus continuing to drive with like no oil, right, in the engine or no gas. And so we're not going to get very far, and we just end up, I'm just going to manually push the car. Screw it. Like, that's fine. That's like the point to where we get to sometimes, when we can just take a step back, take a break, find out where the gas stations are, and maybe just go there. And like, maybe it's way easier when to drive the car with gas. So it's more about flow versus force.
Yeah, it's the funniest thing. I watched this interview recently with Dan Bilzerian and I think it was Chris Williamson. And Dan Bilzerian's known as like the modern Hugh Hefner, always girls, private jets, like living this crazy hedonistic lifestyle, traveling all over the world, like just throwing $1 million parties and everything like that. And, he was known for that, famous for that on social media for that. And watched this interview. And after all these years of just doing all this crazy stuff, spending money like it was going out of style, gambling and poker and girls everywhere and all of that sort of stuff, he sort of came to the conclusion that, the most important things are really just to be present, to be grateful, and to value peace. And I'm like, that is just so hilarious, like coming from someone like him who like
Yeah.
embodied the complete opposite of all of that, to say something like that, which would come from like maybe a monk or the Dalai Lama or, or Naval Ravikant or something
Yeah.
like that.
Took $1 million to get there.
Yeah, and that got me thinking, do we have to learn those lessons the hard way? Do we have to hit rock bottom? Do we have to try to kind of get to the top of the mountain and find out, it's not everything that I thought it would be, and that these are really the more important things, and some people kind of never even get there. What are your thoughts? Do you have to find out yourself? Can you work this out from other people's experience and just get straight to the good place, or do we have to go to the bad place first?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I've asked myself that quite a bit. Right now, I don't know if I'll believe this forever, but at the moment, I almost do believe that you have to hit rock bottom to know. Because how often do we just love listening to other people and just saying, oh yeah, I'm going to take whatever you say and just implement it immediately in my life? Most
Yeah,
of the time, we're so stubborn. We're like, no, I'm not going to listen to this. I'm going to do it my way first. I'm going to,
yeah.
no, like, I can be like a billionaire and be happy at the same time. It's like, all right, let's try and see what happens. Like, I've never met a happy billionaire, and a lot of billionaires will also say they have not met happy billionaires. But it's like very interesting, right? And it's like, it's not a bad thing, right? That these people chase these things. It's not bad at all. And I'm not knocking whatever they're doing. Is that truly what you want? And to me, the most important part is, are you living in alignment with your values, or are you
Mm.
living someone else's? So to me, because we're so stubborn, I almost feel like we really do need to learn from our own failures and our mistakes. And until we actually go down that path and fail miserably to the point where our egos are reduced to nothing, then we're like, okay, maybe I should try something else. Maybe what I wanted wasn't actually what I wanted. But yeah, we just generally do not get there until we exhausted all options. Like in life, we generally learn from contrast of like, I'm going to chase after this thing. And I'm like, oh, shoot, I got this thing. And it's not what I thought it was.
Mm,
Having all this significance, all this fame, all this money, like working 100 hours a week to get there, sacrificing everything, including my health, my family, my friends,
mm.
like that was not worth it. And like no one could tell you that it wouldn't be worth it. And if anything, people telling you that probably fueled you more to go in that direction to prove them wrong. And then when you got there, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
this is not what it's about. This is not worth it. The bridges I had to burn to get there. So to me, like we have to kind of learn through that experience. And pain is the best teacher, to be honest.
Well, the counter to that, because some people would say, oh, well, that's rich guys kind of philosophizing or whatever. You know, you got to a good place, you've now got enough.
I got there before any of that. Yeah, I had nothing. I finally was able to experience peace when I had like couple $1,000s in the bank account. And well, it's like negative. It was like 50 grand. And I was like, I finally want to live life on my own terms, like irrespective and irrelevant of what my external circumstances were. And that's why things changed for me. I didn't get this perspective after the success. I wouldn't have it if I had that perspective because I would still be chasing all those other things. There's no, I would have been able to write the book if I wrote it from that place. And anyone that reads it can definitely feel that it does not come from a place of like peer privilege and everything was handed and there was just so much money flowing in and I just wrote it from that place. Like not at all. But yeah, and so I know it's completely possible. And I know that just from my own personal experience and just seeing how other people live, like the nicest people in the world, they have gone through some of the worst things. And I believe that they found a way to be able to make peace with themselves, their demons, their past traumas, and are just like, I don't want to suffer any longer and I don't want to cause anyone else suffering. And I'm going to pursue peace over everything else, no matter what the circumstances are. And I mean, some of the most influential people in the world are just not like people that like really changed the course of the world, like Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, like all these people, like it's not like they had loads and loads of money. Like they didn't need that to find the peace. And so I think it's important to know that you can find it in any moment and actually in the present moment without anything, without needing anything else.
Yeah. The way I've thought about it, and, you know, I reserve the right to change my mind down the track, but I think of it in terms of seasons. Like, this is my money making season where it's important that I get to a certain level of wealth or whatever, or this is my writing season. I need to put all my resources into putting the book. But the thing is with seasons is that, you know, they're kind of self-contained. So this is not your whole entire life is about making money or your whole entire life is about writing the next book or whatever. It's like, I think it's Naval who came up with this analogy where he says, work like a lion, not like a cow, right? So a cow
Yeah.
chews low nutrient food all day, right? Whereas a lion will go on a hunt for an hour and then sleep for 23 hours,
Yeah.
right? So in a similar way, a big burst of energy to get some goal accomplished and then a lot of time in between the next thing. And then, so we're not continually just chasing the next thing. So that's kind of like where I've come to. So, you know, I came out with a book, Lean Marketing, which came out in May, and I spent probably a year very intensely writing, editing, doing all of that stuff. And definitely neglected some friends, definitely neglected some family, whatever. But I'm like, hey, this is book release season. I've just got to do it and then let it go. Not, I mean, we're still obviously promoting it heavily and all of that sort of thing. But you know that season is done, and then I open some space for normal life.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Like that was the case for my book as well. It was just intense writing for X amount of months and then heavy promotion for about a year or two after. And that to me was all consuming, right? And it was important that within those moments that I did find space for myself still versus just like going kind of haywire in that direction. But I do believe in those seasons and knowing what season you're in is quite important. And hopefully you're able to still find some space no matter what season you're in to create space for yourself and those new ideas and really take care of yourself. But yeah, I think someone said like, you know, you need to create imbalance to at least get somewhere and then find balance thereafter. So it's waves. It's everything fluctuates, everything's constantly in motion and vibrates in that way.
All right. So getting back to some of the marketing strategies with your book. So did I hear you correctly when you said there were other books with the same title, but they didn't have the kind of success that you did? So you couldn't really just say, hey, it's the title that made this book. Because there are definitely
That's
some
true.
books out there where there's not much substance to the book, but the title is just phenomenal. We couldn't really say the same thing about yours because there's other books with the same title, right?
Yeah, no, that's correct. There's so many different things that went into it. I would say the book title, this book subtitle, the cover, those are all so important. And if that wasn't dialed in, then people wouldn't buy. They wouldn't even flip into the first page. So because of that, that started the flywheel. But if it was a terrible book and no one got any value from it, the wheel would stop turning right then and there. Like they would buy, but then they would just leave that 1-star review and that's it. The book would just die. But
Ew.
books live or die by word of mouth. Essentially, make a book successful is make sure that it hits word of mouth, what I call word of mouth critical mass, which is when people start sharing the book so much that it kind of outweighs all of the marketing that you're already doing. So it takes on a life of its own. And the only way to ever get there is to write something that is transformative, something that does change people's lives for the better in a way that is highly significant. And it's not just like an incremental improvement. So for the book, it did that for people. Not to say that I wrote like an amazing book. It's just people, that's what people have experienced. And I'm super grateful for that. But without that, then the book would not be a success at all. So it compounds on that.
And tactically, you used TikTok very strategically to get the word out about did you use TikTok before the book came out or?
Yes, I used TikTok before.
Okay. Because I've looked at some of your TikToks and it's mainly you just reading passages from the
Yeah.
book and you've got a very soothing voice and people love listening to that. But before that, what did you do on TikTok and how did you build up that momentum?
So I didn't have any platforms really. Right around when I started writing the book, I just wrote the book and I was like, oh, I might as well just start posting just to get used to it because I knew I would have to post to get the word out there. So I just said, it's as good as time as any to just learn how to do this thing. And I probably should learn before I actually release the book. So I have some sort of understanding of the platforms. But back then I was just posting my own writing still and I would just write about something that I was really passionate about, which is more in the spiritual realm, more of like law of attraction. And
So you were writing like what blogs or Twitter posts or like what?
it was literally like 3 or 4 sentences and just posting on TikTok. It just like really short excerpts where I would just talk about, let's say a topic was specifically like the law of attraction. A lot of people think that they need to constantly hold into their minds, that they need to visualize this thing very clearly, very concretely, and be obsessed about that particular idea to attract that thing. And I wrote out that while that may work, something that is much more effective is kind of releasing the desire for that thing and in focusing more of the feeling than the actual physical counterpart of what you want. Because the feeling is what you're going after anyway. The feeling of abundance, the feeling of peace, the feeling of security. Emotions are all we're optimizing for in life. Like we want that Rolex to feel significant. We want like that house to like feel safe. We want money to feel security. We want like a partner to feel loved. Everything we're doing is for feeling. So we might as well focus on that because what is attracted, like the emotions, what attracts the things that we want in life, like the people, right? If we're generally happier, then we're going to attract people who are happier. Like attracts like. So that's what I would write about, and it would be like 3 or 4 sentences and post it up, and that it was just like a random B-roll shot of something. Like it was just me by the bookshelf before, and I would just have text on the screen, and it would get tens of thousands of views, 100,000 sometimes, and it just grew from there, just because I was sharing my own truth and something that helped me, and it seemed to be helping a lot of other people. So that's how I started, and then once the book came out, I started marketing the book. I started reading the book and talking a lot more about those topics specifically. So I shifted quite a bit, but I just learned on the platform what people liked. And that was a great training ground for me.
That's really cool. I saw a video by a guy. He basically said something like, don't hold it against me if this changes the whole way that you look at your goals forever. He said, first, write down your biggest, boldest goal. Got it? Great. Next, write down how you're going to feel when you achieve it. Got it? Good. Okay. And goes, lastly, write down that the timeline or the approximate date in which you plan to achieve that goal. So once you've got all those three, he goes, now the goal is not the goal. The goal is the feeling you wrote down that you'll feel when you achieve that goal. And the timeline is the amount of time you're willing to wait for that feeling. So I thought that was really, really good. So it made me think about goals in a very different way, because we are chasing that significance. We are chasing that feeling of whatever achievement or whatever it be. And, some people try to achieve those feelings in an artificial way. Maybe it's some kind of vice, maybe it's drugs, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's whatever. That can make you feel, good or whatever, or significant. And it kind of got me thinking, can you achieve those feelings naturally without vices and it be still as impactful as achieving the goal? I don't know. Is that, what do you think? I haven't come to the conclusion whether that's possible or not, but what do you think?
We obviously need to become alcoholics and drug addicts in order to be happy. That's obviously what you're saying, Alan. So I think fortunately we don't have to resort to those mechanisms. And, everyone does those things for a reason, right? Like we're all trying to escape the pain that we feel inside. That's why we
Mm,
do these things. So I don't judge anyone at all when they pick up those vices. It's just we don't know any differently when we're in that spot. And until we learn that, oh, there are other ways to be able to deal with this pain that we feel, there are healthier alternatives, more sustainable ways in order to find peace in our lives. And until we're exposed to that, we just don't know. And so that's why I also wrote the book, is just hopefully this can be an alternative path for someone, and they don't have to resort to those things. Luckily, our human bodies are amazing, right? Like what these things do for us is, like whenever we achieve something external that makes us feel good inside, all the external thing was a reminder that we could generate those feelings for ourselves. We didn't necessarily need the thing, right? Because if you just ask yourself, what are some moments that you were the happiest in your life? Just feel, and when you felt so much love, like how much of that was completely reliant on achieving something or doing something crazy or significant. Many of those times is just spending time with your loved ones, or, the first time someone had a child, or, getting married or whatever it is. It's these things that don't necessarily need to be big and lavish. Like some of my greatest memories is just being there with my wife and just like
mm,
sitting next to her and just feeling like an overwhelming amount of love, just like being able to sit next to each other. We can be doing something like Legos or something, like that's great
yeah.
too, but we don't necessarily need that in order to find happiness. And we find it in almost everything or anything that we do. And so that's the pinnacle for me.
But I think what you're describing is happiness. And I read this somewhere and I kind of agree with that. He said basically happiness is boring, right? So happiness and highs are two different things. Happiness is generally pretty boring. It's like being in the backyard, enjoying the fresh air, the sunshine, all of that sort of thing, right? It's not a feeling of a high, wow, but it feels good, right? But then there's highs where, wow, I did that big exit, or I
Yep.
closed this big deal, or I hit the bestseller list, or whatever, right? And so it kind of gets me thinking around what's the relationship? Can you feel highs any other way? And I I think the answer is no, but
Yeah. That's a great point you bring up. So yeah, there's highs, and if there's highs, that means there's lows. So it's
yeah,
unavoidable. And what I'm chasing isn't necessarily the high, like you said. It's more about that contentment, that peace.
yeah,
Actually, the feeling is more so freedom than
mm,
anything else. In particular, not like financial freedom, but more so like freedom from mind, that
mm,
incessant negative critic in there. And if I'm free from that, then nothing else matters to me. And I'm able to actually enjoy myself. Whatever I'm doing in the moment, I'm actually able to be here rather than thinking and regretting about the past or having anxious thoughts about the future.
So does that mean we shouldn't chase big goals?
No, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't. That's a fantastic question too. It's just don't base your happiness on those goals. It's
Mm,
like when you do have them, can you be at peace with or without achieving that goal? And can we see it more as play than something that is a requirement for our own sanity, our own well
mm,
being? Right. And so I kind of compartmentalize those things so that I'm not anxious all the time. I'm not like constantly stressed out, because if I say to myself, and I think Naval Ravikant also said, it's like desire is a contract that you'll be unhappy until you achieve that thing. So I want to break that contract, because I don't want to subscribe to that because most of our lives are not highs. It's like 98%
I
just
agree.
level. And so for me, it's more important to be aware of those highs and lows from like that baseline. And so that's why grounding for me is so important every day in the morning and just like, oh, can I be happy without any of that stuff? And if when I do accomplish those things, that's amazing. And then I'll just know that's also fleeting. Very different way to approach a lot of these things. And I just create now more out of like abundance and love, like just pure excitement and joy out of doing the thing rather than like I want some sort of accolade out of it. But those things come as a byproduct anyway when you create out of like that sense of love or that sense of curiosity and wonder because it's a very infectious energy and it's such a wonderful place to be.
The other thing about highs is once you hit a high, you want a bigger high and a bigger high and a bigger high, right? And especially if you've had a big hit early on, that's often a very high bar. So, I mean, if you've sold 1 million books, okay, great. Now I want to sell 2 million
Yep.
books or 10 million books or revenue or whatever it is. And yeah, especially if you've had an early hit, that can be super difficult to kind of get back to that place.
Oh yeah, it's a slippery slope. Like it doesn't disappear forever. It comes back all the time. It's like, oh, now that you did this, like why don't you try to do something else? And
Yeah.
now that you're a big shot, like now people have eyeballs on you. People are going to think about you a certain way and all this stuff. And it's incredibly difficult, right? It's very distracting. But I really try my best to center myself on what really does matter to me. And that's more so like creative expression, freedom from mind and those types of things, and really following what feels most expansive and aligned in the moment. And a lot of times that is pursuing a big project, but it's not out of like necessity. It's more out of like curiosity.
I love that. I love that. So, in terms of getting your message out there, what platforms, what strategies, what tactics have you found most impactful? So I know you've done very well on TikTok. Your YouTube channel looks like it's doing quite well. Can you share some of the tactical things that you've done to really get your message out to your audience? And then how do you think about that content creation? Like, do you just turn on the camera and riff? Do you plan it out? What's your process? I'd love to know.
Yeah. So in terms of marketing, things are very, very simple and straightforward for me. I run Amazon ads, which is the bread and butter. That's like the staple and full of consistent sales for me. That provides the most stability by far. And it gets a great return, like 2 to 3x depending on the month. But I
Yeah.
just keep that running as high as I possibly can. The
Yeah.
next thing that I do is TikTok, particularly affiliates. So sending out a lot of invitations to affiliates for them to become affiliates for my book specifically.
Mhm.
And what I'll do is I'll send them out an invitation. They can request a free sample. And then if they request a free sample, I'll ship it out to them. Then they just make a post about it. And that's generally it. But that brings in the other 40, 50% of sales for the book. And then I have my own socials, right? Like I'll post on Instagram sometimes, TikTok sometimes, and YouTube. But those are kind of like the lower tier things in terms of what moves the book. And it's mostly different platforms doing the work for me, which is very interesting versus my own efforts. Although it was my own efforts in the beginning, like I ran my own Amazon ads in the very beginning. I made my own TikTok videos in the very beginning until it started selling. And then other affiliates started looking at it and saying, "Oh, I want a piece of the pie, and I think I can sell the book better than him," which they have. And so the majority of the sales does come from affiliates instead of my own videos now, but it was the opposite before. And it's kind of simple. And I just, instead of trying or spreading myself too thin, I really 10x every platform I possibly could. So whenever something's working, I just always think of how can I 10x this rather than what's 10 other things I can do? Because that just generally does not work. Not well, at least.
Yeah. So tell me, how does the affiliate thing work? So I'm assuming that's TikTok Shop affiliates, and
Yeah, you have to have a TikTok shop, and you have to be able to fulfill those orders that come in. So either sending your inventory into TikTok and having them fulfill it, or having your own warehouse and then integrating that into TikTok shop. Once you have that, then you can actually send out free samples and have people request them and things like that. But yeah, you can go on the TikTok shop platform and go into the affiliate center and then look up creators to invite, and then you can send out invitations to them specifically for them to promote your book.
so do you have a 3PL for filling your book,
Yes.
or do you? Okay, right. So that never kind of touches the Amazon ecosystem or anything like that. They see your book on TikTok, they like it or whatever, and they buy it right then and there. And
Oh,
we're talking the
well, yeah. I will say there's a lot of people that see the TikTok posts and then will go buy on Amazon. I have no idea what the distribution is, but every time a video does go viral, Amazon sales do spike. So I'm assuming, I have no idea, but I'm assuming it's 50-50. 50% will actually buy on TikTok. The other 50% will go buy on Amazon just because people just enjoy Amazon a lot more. It's faster. There's no shipping cost.
And if they buy it on TikTok, that's the physical version. It's not a digital edition or anything like that,
Correct. They
is
don't
it?
allow digital editions of anything on TikTok Shop.
What's your process for going and finding those affiliates? Do you actively search for them, or you find someone with a certain amount of followers or similar content or whatever, or how do you go about that?
So I look for manually for all of it. Because the book is so widely appealing, I don't necessarily target too specifically. If I had a cooking book I mean, even cooking book is really broad. So it had to be
Yeah.
something hyper specific. Your book, for example, would be a little bit more targeted, right? Like I'd want to find entrepreneurs, I'd want to find business owners, I'd want to find freelancers and look for those particular creators. So I would always look in whatever niche you're in and then finding creators that make content on that. Then you can reach out to them. And then for me, I calculated the raw cost in order to send out a book. So what is the raw cost to print the book and what is the raw cost to ship it? For me, it costs about $6 total for everything.
Hmm.
And so I kind of do the math and I'm like, okay, if an affiliate sells 2 books, I at least break even. So do I think they can sell 3 or more books based on the
Mm.
videos that they are making? If they can, they get automatically invited. It's very simple. And then I just keep sending out those free
So when you say
samples.
automatically invited, that's using the TikTok platform. You can say, "Hey, invite this person." TikTok Shop platform. Hey, invite this person to be an affiliate. Is that right?
Yeah, so we have to actually go in manually and select, I think, 50 at a time, but you can mass invite 50 at a time, and then they'll all get an invite with a message from you specifically, and then they'll see the commission rate and things like that.
So you're not individually DMing the person saying, "Hey, Alan, I like your content. Would you like to be an affiliate? I'll send you a free sample or whatever." You're using kind of the TikTok Shop platform to do
That's
all that. Is
correct,
that right?
but it'll technically send them a DM though through that.
Right. Okay.
So
Gotcha.
it's hyper efficient. Yeah.
That's really cool. So essentially, your criteria is, can this person sell three or more books? That's pretty much
Yeah, that's
pretty
it.
simple, right?
Yeah. So the bar is very low, and if I tried to analyze every creator, look at their analytics, see how many, it's just too much work. And you have to play the numbers game when you're working with TikTok because it takes a lot of videos to go viral. Like I'm
Yeah.
talking about dozens, if not hundreds of videos. But it's kind of like venture capital investing where,
Yeah.
you kind of invest in 10 startups and one of them becomes a unicorn. Actually, it's more like 100 and maybe up like 3 to 5 maybe would become
Yeah.
those unicorns. It's very much the same game. And that type of distribution curve is everywhere when it comes to sales, when it comes to money, when it comes to anything numerical like that. So I'm definitely going for quantity. And eventually the quality comes from that. And I can afford that because the books aren't expensive. If I had something that costed like $50 to send out, I wouldn't be able to play that game. And I had to be very picky with who I'm onboarding.
Gotcha. And so, have you played around with what commission rates work best for affiliates? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah. So generally I do 20%. Sometimes I'll go higher if they ask, just because I want to incentivize them a little bit more. That's only if they ask though. I think the minimum is about, I think 10%, and 15 is normal, and then 20% is like above average. So anyone that sees 20 and above, they will generally want to request a free sample more than someone that has 15 or 10. You can even go up to 20, 30% if you really want to kind of get the traction going. You can
Yeah,
always reduce it later on, but I always started with 20, so it's slightly above average.
gotcha. And what's the ticket price that you found works best? So, are they selling the whole thing for what, $20, or like what does that look like?
So the retail price is $20, and then I put it on sale for $12.99. And I just keep that promotion going at all times. People just like seeing a sale. Like they just like getting a deal. So that's why I do that. And then from there, I add in shipping. So it's about $6 or $7 for shipping. I could do $20 in free shipping. For me, I've seen higher sales at a lower ticket price plus shipping.
Right.
And so I would split test it, but for me, that's what works better, oddly enough, for some reason. Even though they always say like, oh, people will buy more if there's free shipping. But yeah, it costs more though. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting what people see and what people buy. And the other reason why I do that is because TikTok Shop will actually sponsor a lot of the shipping costs. So they'll give out these free shipping coupons and people
Right.
can use that and redeem it. So then if people use that coupon, I actually get paid out for the shipping costs on top. So I don't lose anything, but the customer gets free shipping. And that's all sponsored by TikTok. So that's why I do that. And so why I haven't really seen a dip, but actually an increase by doing that strategy.
That's really cool. And how are you fulfilling so I mean, obviously you've got a 3PL, but like, let's say someone orders the book in the UK or in, I don't know, Nigeria or something like that. I mean, that's sometimes like $50 to send a book.
Yeah. So my 3PL only works in the US. Everywhere else is Amazon and they take care of all of that. So if a video goes viral, generally where videos go viral is kind of native in the country. So everything is centralized in the US for now. Maybe in the future I'll expand 3PLs and go into different markets, but that seems like a lot of work at the moment. And actually, maybe that'll be a great expansion strategy when I do want to go down that path. And TikTok Shop is, I think it started in the US. And I think now they're starting to enter different markets like Australia. Like, I don't know if it's there yet. It may or may not be. UK, I think they just opened that up more recently. So I wanted to kind of create a formula in the US first and then kind of expand from there. And 3PLs are definitely harder to work with overseas. And yeah, if anyone knows any good ones, just let me know because I
Ah,
haven't cracked that code yet.
yeah. Okay. That's cool. That's cool. I'm definitely going to get onto that. I'm going to do that as a project. I think that's really cool. I've never experimented with TikTok Shop, and I mean, I've done a lot of the things that you do in terms of running ads, maximizing Amazon ads, all of those sorts of things, reaching out to people to review the book and all of that. But I've not experimented with TikTok Shop, so that's definitely something I'm going to put on our R
Yeah,
and
that'll be
D.
fun.
I
Yeah, you'll need
enjoy
a
telling.
3PL in the US if you're selling there, but definitely worth it. And or actually, you can use TikTok Shop. What is it called? Fulfilled by TikTok.
So TikTok will actually warehouse the stuff, will I?
Correct. Yeah, it's like Amazon FBA. I
Hmm.
would probably recommend that path just because it's so streamlined. Unless you're going to try to sell, right, like on Shopify and run ads through Meta or something and point people to your Shopify. But if you're not going to do that and you're just going to try TikTok Shop, it might be worth a shot.
So do you run a Shopify shop yourself, or do you? So why did
Yes.
you do that versus Filled by TikTok?
Fulfilled by TikTok wasn't available when I
Right.
first did it. I probably would have done that first if it was available. And they just more recently came out with that, I think in the past year or so, but I had a shop long before that. So yeah, but if you wanted to test the grounds, that'd be a great one. And they're actually incentivizing people to do that. I think they cover shipping if you do Fulfilled by TikTok and someone orders more than like $20 worth of stuff.
Right.
So there's a lot of incentive to do so.
Okay. I'll look into that. All right. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Get your books
So
printed by a, what do you call it? A offset printer. That way you can get your book
yeah,
costs way
yeah. I mean,
down.
we do offset printing. We print them in batches of about 30,000 units every few months. So we've got tons of inventory, and yeah, we've got a good fulfillment agent as well. But I think it'd be worth testing the fulfilled by TikTok as well. So I'm gonna test that out.
That'd be awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
30,000 is not a small number every few months. You're doing awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely doing well, and yeah, we're print runs all the time, which is really cool. So, but yeah, I'm definitely going to implement some of your strategies.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exciting. Let me know how it goes.
Joseph, I really appreciate your time. We've talked about a lot of things, and I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for sharing so openly. Your book is Don't Believe Everything You Think. Where is the best place for someone who wants to connect with you? Do you have a newsletter, or is it your TikTok channel, or
Yeah,
where's the best
so
place?
there's my newsletter and my YouTube are probably the best places to find me. So my website is, and for the newsletter, you can sign up at josephwyn.org. So JOSEPHNGUYEN.org/newsletter. That's where you can sign up for that. I send out an email about every week or so and, tons of great insights, nuggets of wisdoms there. So that's where you can find me. And then my YouTube channel is just my first and last name. So Joseph Wynn, type that on YouTube and you'll be able to find some videos that I have there.
Awesome. And we'll link to all of that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And we'll talk again real soon.
Thanks so much, Allan. It was a blast. Thanks.